The anime begins by showing a chilling scene depicting a devastating phenomenon that eradicates 2/3 of the human population. The calamity is caused by an enigmatic disease called the Cagaster disease, which transforms humans into insects. However, the metamorphosed body of the infected becomes impervious to bullets and knives, and the only way to kill them is by beheading them within a 20-minute window. Against this backdrop, we meet two Cagaster independent exterminators, Kidow and Jean, patrolling their neighborhood. As they go about their duty, Kidow spots a car being pursued by several Cagasters. Without hesitation, they intervene, taking on the chasing Cagasters and emerging victorious. Upon inspection of the car, Kidow and Jean find a man and his daughter, Ellie, inside. The man entrusts Ellie to Kidow and implores him to reunite her with her mother, Tanya, before passing away. After regaining consciousness, Ellie is distraught upon learning of her father's demise. Kidow promises to take her to her mother in a town called E05. Along the way, they encounter a person undergoing Cagaster transformation, and Kidow takes swift action to terminate the infected. In E05, Kidow arranges for Ellie to stay with him at an inn, where she meets the friendly innkeeper, Mario, who is also Kidow's friend. The following day, Kidow receives news that Ellie has escaped from Mario's inn. However, he chooses not to look for her, feeling that it's not his place to interfere with her decision. This leads to a disagreement with Mario, who believes that Kidow should take responsibility for Ellie's safety. Meanwhile, Ellie finds herself in a vastly different world than her rural village, struggling to survive on the outskirts of the heavily populated E05 city. She meets a boy named Naji, who offers her food and tells her about the region's tragic past. A Cagaster outbreak had occurred, resulting in the deaths of countless people due to the inability to eradicate them in time. In a desperate attempt to contain the spread, the city's main gate was locked, and the trapped residents were ultimately burned along with the Cagasters by the extermination army. Despite the horrors she witnesses, Ellie remains determined to return home to her village, where there are still green pastures and sheep. Her encounter with Naji prompts her to realize that she needs to go back to Kidow, who had saved her before. Kidow, on the other hand, realizes his mistake and begins to search for Ellie. He eventually finds her and brings her back to the inn, where she is warmly welcomed by Mario and Jean. Sometime later, Kidow receives a report that a human has turned into a Cagaster. When he arrives at the scene with the anti-insect tank troops, Kidow discovers 3 people who have been killed by Cagasters. Later, he goes to the next location and is greatly shocked to see the extremely brutal traces of murder. Kidow realizes that it is not the work of Cagasters or humans. At night, some residents spot a mysterious person who turns out to be the killer. As time goes on, the E05 city guards find 4 mutilated bodies and all the victims are exterminators. It can be concluded that the discovery of the previous corpse that was brutally murdered was also the result of the mysterious person. The next day, Kidow and his army of anti-insect tanks set out on a mission to kill Cagasters in their lair, as their population has recently increased drastically. Sometime later, Mario tells Ellie to sell the black lizard in the market. But on the way, Ellie's bag is stolen by a boy named Rio, who turns out to be Naji's friend. Naji helps Ellie track down Rio's headquarters, where they discover that Rio is a member of a gang called the Red Rats led by a girl named Lizzie. To retrieve her bag, Lizzie challenges Ellie to play catch and run with them. Ellie chases Lizzie and the others to get her bag back, while Naji looks for them. Later, Naji is surprised to find Ellie's clothes stuck in the fence. Sometime later, Kidow completes the mission and returns to Mario's inn. While Kidow was in his room, he stumbled upon a letter that contained a map leading to the watchtower at the west gate, where the bodies of the victims were found. He suspected that the letter was from the killer. Soon after, Kidow saw Naji running with Ellie's clothes, who told him that Ellie had gone to a hideout belonging to a gang called the Red Rats at the West Gate Observation Tower. Realizing that the hideout was located at the place indicated in the letter, Kidow rushed to the scene. Meanwhile, Rio was waiting for Lizzie at the West Gate when he heard a chant coming from the direction of the killer, who was in the middle of mutilating a victim. Rio immediately shouted for help, and Kidow came to his rescue. Kidow engaged in a fierce battle with the killer, who he realized was not an ordinary human as half of his body had been transformed into a Cagaster, while his mind remained conscious. Therefore, the killer had the ability to use Cagaster's abilities, making it challenging for Kidow to subdue him. Suddenly, a bell rang, and they heard Ellie's voice asking for help. The killer was distracted and went after Ellie. Kidow quickly intervened and shot the killer in the neck, causing him to flee. Sometime later, the city of E05 was bustling with excitement as a caravan arrived to bring joy and entertainment to the residents. But the celebrations were short-lived as disaster struck when the sheep-carrying car was swallowed by a massive hole that opened up in the desert. The next day, the anti-insect tank squad consisting of Qasim, Hadi, and Aisha arrived at the site of the hole and discovered that the car had been devoured by a monstrous creature. The squad immediately became worried as they feared that the monster might reach the settlement and cause havoc, just like the tragic events that had occurred 5 years ago. They knew they had to act fast and come up with a plan to eliminate the creature before it was too late. After much discussion, they decided that someone strong would have to act as bait to lure the monster out into the open, and then blow it up. Surprisingly, Qasim offered to be the bait, as he felt guilty for the tragedy that occurred 5 years ago at the West Gate. He remembered how many children had lost their parents due to the anti-insect tank squad losing their way and trapping them to their death, including Lizzie. When Eli was walking in the city, she ran into Lizzie, who invited her to play in their secret underground shortcut. They stumbled upon a truck carrying sheep that had fallen the day before and noticed a group of sheep had followed them inside. Suddenly, Eli heard the sound of screaming sheep and instinctively ran towards the source. Meanwhile, Keto and the anti-insect tank members were devising a strategy to kill the Cagaster monster that had swallowed the sheep-carrying truck. Their plan was to lure it through the gates of the blue, green, yellow, and red areas before blowing it up underground. However, Naji interrupted their meeting with news that Lizzie, Eli, and the others were underground chasing the sheep. Keto immediately rushed to save them, while Qasim was stationed in the red area as the last line of defense. Meanwhile, Eli and her friends found the sheep but were soon confronted by the Cagaster monster. The creature chased them relentlessly, but just in the nick of time, Keto arrived to rescue them. Despite their best efforts, the monster managed to enter the red area where Qasim was waiting to sacrifice himself. In the aftermath of the monster attack, Keto manages to save Qasim just before the anti-insect tank blows up the underground area. Qasim is known to be kind-hearted, especially towards the children of the village, including Lizzie. As a token of gratitude, Qasim gives Keto a necklace to give to Eli. However, during their conversation, Qasim suddenly starts to transform into a Cagaster. Lizzie approaches Qasim and apologizes for calling him a murderer before, but it is too late as Qasim's body slowly turns into a monster. Qasim then asks Hadi to kill him, but Lizzie forbids it. With only 8 minutes left before he completely transforms, Qasim begs Keto to end his life. The scene shifts to Keto, a resident of a far eastern city who narrowly escapes a deadly fire caused by a Cagaster outbreak. Keto owes his survival to a man named Lazarus, an experienced Cagaster exterminator who had been a mentor to Keto since childhood. Lazarus had taught Keto everything he knew about fighting and surviving against Cagasters. Keto meets Lazarus' wife Kara and becomes close to her as well. One day, Lazarus and Keto, along with a group of other exterminators, embark on a mission to eliminate a nest of Cagasters. However, they are ambushed by the Far Eastern military, who believe the exterminators to be rebels. An explosion occurs during the fight and a stone falls on Keto, but Lazarus saves him, breaking his own right hand in the process. In a conversation with Keto after the fight, Lazarus reveals that he was once a soldier who had fought against the rebels, but he eventually joined them and became their leader under the name Karakam. Lazarus had hoped to end the conflict between the military and the exterminators by offering his own life. He also advises Keto to find his own path in life. As Lazarus begins to transform into a Cagaster, Keto is forced to kill him before he fully turns, leaving Keto feeling lost and alone. Kara tries to comfort him, but Keto remains deeply affected by the loss of his mentor and father figure. The following day, Captain Eduardo from the Far East Allied Force headquarters visits Keto, who had killed someone before their wings appeared. To Keto's surprise, Eduardo proposes that he work with the military. Feeling conflicted, Keto decides to leave the city where Kara is and start a new life. In the meantime, Far East forces from the town of E01 are heading towards E05, along with an assassin, with the intention of invasion. Hadi informs Keto and Jean about Lizzie's scholarship offer from Qasim, who wants to send her to school and nurture her talents. Despite her initial reluctance to leave her friends, Lizzie eventually accepts the offer after receiving Qasim's necklace from Naji, who advises her on the importance of a good education. During their conversation, Hadi mentions some strange data he found in the Cagaster outbreak patient records in the F47 area. 3 years ago, a man from that region turned into a Cagaster, but he did not attack humans or cause any damage. This happened around the same time that Ili arrived in E05, who herself originally hails from the F47 region. Furthermore, there was a recent incident where a man tried to kidnap a girl in the forest but was stopped by a shepherd boy. The man then transformed into a Cagaster and left without harming anyone. Surprisingly, the girl has features that resemble Ili's, with silver blonde hair and a braided hairstyle. Hadi also has a bad feeling about the existence of Far East E01 soldiers who have something to do with Ili. After that, Keto then met Ili and asked what happened before Ili's father was attacked by Cagaster. Unfortunately, Ili didn't remember anything. Shortly thereafter, Far East troops come to Mario's and to bring Ili, then appears a man named Franz who says if Ili is his daughter. Keto escapes and is pursued by the Far East. Luckily, it was Lizzie and the other children who managed to hide the two of them underground. Keto then plans to take Ili out of the E05 city area later that night, though that would make them fugitives. Keto was determined not to return to the city. But suddenly they were both attacked by the killer, so Keto returned to fight fiercely with him and managed to unmask the killer. While Ili and the others were in hiding, they were instead found by the soldiers of the Far East. The soldiers then tried to take Ili, but Naji tried to fight the army and was beaten and threatened to be killed. In that desperate situation, Ili finally remembered a thing from her past. Ili then imagined Cagaster around her, then said something to make one of the Far East soldiers turn into Cagaster and obey her words. After Ili displayed her unique ability, the half-Cagaster assassin named Ak then withdrew from Keto. Ak then gave Keto a key and said that Keto should visit the place where the key came from in the city of A7. In the past, before the Cagaster plague became as severe as it is now, Dr. Franz worked in a lab with a man named Griffin who claimed to be Ili's father. The two discussed the project to use Cagasters as a weapon to strengthen the Far East military forces, but the experiment failed and caused explosions in some areas. Despite this setback, Griffin and Franz became closer and worked well together. One day, Griffin met Franz's younger sister Tanya, who was also hired by the lab officials to research the Queen Cagaster, a powerful Cagaster that can control all others. The lab wanted to create a Queen Cagaster for military bioweapons. Franz was tasked with conducting research to develop new conclusions about the creation of Queen Cagaster. However, Griffin eventually discovered that Tanya was not actually Franz's biological sister, but rather a human child who was almost turned into a Cagaster during the outbreak. Tanya was discovered by Franz's father, who later adopted her as his younger daughter, and Franz treated her as his own sister. After years of research, the lab was successful in fertilizing an egg from Tanya with Cagaster DNA, resulting in the birth of Ak. As Ak grew up, he was observed every day to monitor his development as a half-Cagaster. Franz and Tanya eventually got married and had a daughter named Ili. However, the lab failed in its attempt to create a Queen Cagaster, which would have been used as a bioweapon for the military. The lab was unable to create a Queen Cagaster, so Franz decided to overthrow Tanya and have her undergo surgery to become the queen. Tanya complied and was put into a cocoon, becoming the respected leader of the Cagasters. 30 years after the Cagaster outbreak, Adam, the ruler of the Far East army, incited Franz to use the queen to turn adults into Cagasters. Franz also had a reserve queen, Ili, who possessed the same abilities as Tanya. In order to stop Franz, Griffin saved Ili and fled with her. Griffin raised Ili as his own daughter, but her abilities eventually surfaced. She could turn humans into Cagasters, just like Tanya and Franz. Despite initial frustration, Griffin decided not to kill Ili and instead worked to find a way to control her powers. Back in the present, Ili is kidnapped by Franz and taken to the lab. However, they are instead besieged by the wild Cagasters who live inside the lab. Ili, who does not want to be killed like the guards, orders the Cagasters not to eat her. To her surprise, the Cagasters obey her command, and she realizes her ability as the Queen of Cagaster. With the help of the Cagasters, Ili manages to escape the lab by hanging onto a Cagaster's feet. During the escape, Ili loses her grip and falls to the bottom of the lab. Just in time, Keto arrives and rescues her. Meanwhile, Franz and his followers are attacked by the wild Cagasters and are never seen again. Let's now go back in time to when Ak and Ili were living as guinea pigs in Cagaster's research lab. The researchers often treat them harshly, considering them as mere monsters to be experimented on. This treatment triggers a deep grudge in Ak's heart, as he realizes the similarities between himself and the Cagasters. In the present time, Mario and the anti-insect tank squad of E05 City are still engaged in a fierce battle against the Far East Army, in order to protect civilians from harm. The city officials are even willing to make sacrifices to defend the control tower, which is the central defense point for the city. Meanwhile, Keto and Ili are on a mission to meet Tanya, but they encounter obstacles in the form of wild Cagasters barricading their path. Ili attempts to use her queen's ability to control the Cagasters, but her efforts prove to be ineffective. As a result, Keto intervenes and manages to rescue Ili, killing the Cagasters and blocking their path in the process. Furthermore, Ak is revealed to have his own agenda for revenge and begins to take brutal action against the lab researchers. Back to Keto and Ili, who eventually approach the emergency lane leading to Tanya's room. They face fierce opposition from the Cagasters. However, they manage to overcome these obstacles and reach their destination. But before they can meet Tanya, they are confronted by Adam and his army, which forces them to separate in order to increase their chances of reaching Tanya. Ili is determined to reach her mother, and she receives unexpected help from Franz, who has realized his mistake. However, their journey is interrupted when Franz is betrayed by Adam and severely injured. Meanwhile, Keto engages in a brutal battle with Adam and his army before finally emerging victorious. Keto then joins Ak, who is on a revenge rampage against the lab researchers. In the midst of all this chaos, Ili finally reaches Tanya's room and bids farewell to Franz. Keto also learns that Ak wants to commit suicide, adding to the intensity of the battle. Ultimately, Ili manages to shut down Tanya's control system, putting an end to the chaos in Cagaster's research lab. Returning to Mario and the E05 city forces, they are struggling to fend off the continuous attacks by Adam's Far East army. The situation becomes dire, and civilians are at risk of getting caught in the crossfire. However, Aisha steps in and brokers a military agreement with Colonel Eduardo of the Allied forces to provide much-needed assistance to the embattled city. With the arrival of Allied forces, the city of E05 is finally able to repel the aggression of Adam's faction, led by Salib. Meanwhile, Ili, who is reunited with Tanya, must mourn her mother's death, who could not survive without the controlling core system for the Cagasters in space. Despite the heartbreak, Ili understands her mother's love and concern for her safety. However, the sudden death of Tanya catches Ak off guard, and Keto takes advantage of the situation by launching an attack to stop Ak's movement. Keto successfully intervened and stopped Ak's movement, urging him to end his quest for revenge and seek forgiveness from God. Ak heeded Keto's advice and entrusted Ili's safety to him before embarking on a journey of self-discovery. Keto then reunited with Ili and proposed to her after paying respects to Tanya. The couple emerged from the research lab and were picked up by Jean, while Ak began his journey to find meaning in life. And thus, the anime comes to an end with the characters having gone through intense battles and personal growth, finding hope and new beginnings. The moral of the story is to never underestimate the power of insect control, for it may lead you to find true love and a higher understanding of life. No matter how intense the battle, always make time for a good proposal. Love can bloom even in the midst of chaos and Cagasters.